For centuries, Christianity has been more than just a religion. It has been a tool of oppression and control, a weapon, a psychological chain that has kept black people enslaved long after the physical chains were removed. From the plantation to the pulpit, from the Bible to the ballot box, white nationalism has shaped how we see God outside of ourselves, how we see ourselves, and how we see power. Today, we're going to break the chains. Did you know that back in time on the slave plantations, slave owners chose certain Pacific black men to be preachers? But not just any black men, those they believed were obedient, those who would not challenge the system, but instead reinforce it. Enslaved black preachers were given selected specific scriptures to preach, such as servants obey your masters, Ephesians 6 and 5, or turn the other cheek, Matthew 5 and 39, or blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, Matthew 5 and 5. But the question becomes to the logical thinker, the critical thinking people is, but who was inheriting the earth? It wasn't our ancestors. These verses were meant to not liberate, they were meant to pacify, and that's the difference. Slave owners knew that religion was the greatest tool of control. So what did they do? They manipulated it. And sadly, many black preachers became pawns in that system. Now, we must admit, not all preachers played along. Nat Turner, our wonderful great ancestor warrior, saw through the deception. He knew that the God of justice didn't call for submission, he called for freedom. And when Turner led one of the most powerful slave revolts in American history, guess who helped shut it down? The same black preachers who had been trained to keep their own people in line. Now let's talk about one of the biggest deceptions of all time, white Jesus. This image was not just about art or Leonardo da Vinci's painting of his male lover, Caesar Borgia, son of Pope Alexander VI, as Jesus. It was a weapon, a psychological bomb that made Black people associate divinity with whiteness and themselves with inferiority. So, if this is about white supremacy, we have to then talk about the real Yeshua and how he was a Northeast African, a Hebrew Palestinian man, not the European figure we see today. The whitewashing of Jesus was intentional, reinforcing white supremacy as divine authority. So if God is white, Jesus, the Son, is white, Mary, the Mother, is white, the angels are white, then whiteness becomes godliness, and blackness becomes everything else. But what we know as decolonized people, people that have removed the blindness, know that in the deep darkness of blackness comes the primordial light. And blackness, melanin, is the mother of us all. Now, this lie has been passed down through many generations. It's this is why so many black churches still hold on to the imagery of a white Jesus. Even today, in the 21st century, with all the knowledge available literally at our fingertips, It's why so many Black people unconsciously believe that true power, true authority, and even true beauty must come from whiteness. Hence, the standard of beauty has been derived. This isn't just about religion, be clear. It's about psychological enslavement. So let's fast forward to today. Let's see, has the Black church changed or has it just been updated? A new facelift. Many of our churches continue the same rhetoric and messages that have kept our ancestors in chains. A message of submission, obedience, and waiting for a reward in the afterlife while suffering in the here and the prosperity gospel, a modern plantation theology that teaches suffering is noble while the preacher, guess what, gets rich. The 501c3 church status. Black churches get tax exempt status. But in exchange, they're restricted from challenging political oppression, government influence. Many Black preachers and leaders align with white power structures rather than grassroots liberation. This idea is part of the plantation theology. So, if we're honest with ourselves, many of our Black churches, instead of being centers for revolution, too many churches have become centers for complacency. Instead of teaching financial freedom and literacy, they push tithing to keep preachers rich while congregants struggle. Instead of demanding systematic change, they preach patience, telling us to wait on the Lord. But wait for what? Another 400 years? Think about it. This term that we hear often, Uncle Tom, has been misused for years. The real Uncle Tom was revolutionary. But today we're talking about, when we use that term, Uncle Tom, we're talking about the sellouts, the Black preachers and leaders who knowingly or unknowingly serve the same system that oppressed our ancestors. And yet today still keeps us in an oppressive state. Unfortunately, many of our prominent Black preachers, they work hand in hand with the oppressors to maintain control over the masses. MLK's radical legacy was sanitized to remove his call for economic justice and revolution. The Black church was once a base for civil rights. Now many are just businesses that are profiting from the suffering of their own people. These modern day overseers tell us to pray while they prey on us. They tell us to forgive while they shake hands with those who harm us. They don't speak about real justice because true justice would mean the collapse of their empire that they've set up for themselves. So, where do we go from here? If the religion we were given was a tool of oppression, do we throw it away completely or do we reclaim it? The answer I offer is very much so can be both. We must work to deconstruct the Christianity of colonization and reconstruct a faith that liberates. The true teachings of Yeshua was about empowerment, not submission. African spirituality, such as Kemetic wisdom, Yoruba tradition, etc., holds the keys to self liberation. And Christ consciousness is about embodying divinity, not just worshiping an external figure. Faith is not the problem, indoctrination is. Spirituality is not the enemy. Mental enslavement is. It's time for Black people to stop waiting for a savior and start becoming the gods we were always meant to be. Now that you know the truth, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do with the truth? Will you keep following the plantation pulpit or will you free your mind? Will you keep bowing to an image of